Hey, Rich B here with Rich Experiences. And today I want to talk about a word that is very confusing. Perhaps you've heard it on your travels, don't really know how to take it, don't really know what it means. And so we're going to break it down here today. The word I'm talking about is Gringo. Perhaps you've heard it. Well, here's something you may not know. See, Gringo is actually a Spanish word. You'll find Gringo in Spanish dictionaries, including the Diccionario de la Lengua Española, which is the official dictionary associated with the Spanish language. So this little 5-letter word, it's official. And like many Spanish nouns referring to people, it has a masculine and a feminine form. Gringo for men and gringa for women. So if someone says, él es gringo, they're saying he's a gringo. But now we get down to the point, the really interesting part, the nuance. What exactly does it mean? What in the world does gringo really mean? Well, the meaning varies depending on where you are. That's just the truth about it. In many parts of Latin America, gringo is commonly used to refer to someone from the U.S. So, for example, someone in a Spanish-speaking country might refer to a North American as a gringo. But it can also have a broader meaning. Now, in some contexts, it can simply mean a foreigner, particularly someone who is perceived as being from a non-Spanish speaking country. So the precise meaning depends on the country and the context. It's one of those gray area words. And this is important because Spanish isn't exactly the same everywhere. Like the Spanish spoken in Mexico isn't identical really to the Spanish exactly spoken in Colombia. And the Spanish spoken in Colombia isn't identical to the Spanish spoken in Argentina. They have great similarities, but it's not identical. One word can mean one thing in one country, Spanish-speaking country, and a totally different thing in another Spanish-speaking country. See? So you can't always assume and can't always take a word and assume it has exactly the same meaning throughout the Spanish-speaking world. Spanish is a varying language. Just how it is. I tell you, I've been out there, and I don't claim to be an expert on this subject. So, hey, if you want to chime in on the comments and leave your 2 cents, go ahead and do it. Let's talk about it. It needs to be discussed, especially if you plan on traveling Latin America. You need to understand this word and the different connotations behind it, or it can just throw you off. So it's best to just understand it beforehand. I know when I first heard it, I didn't know whether to take it one way or the other. In a way, I was kind of offended by it at first. I ain't really sure, but I really didn't know how to take it. It's like, is this person trying to be funny? Well, I'm about to throw some hands. Nah, I was kidding, but it made me feel uncomfortable. And still to this day, sometimes I hear it and it's like, I have to look into, okay, what's the connotation behind it, because usually overall it has become synonymous with the word foreigner. Eres un gringo. Bienvenido. They don't think nothing about it. No, it's just become synonymous with the word foreigner overall. So, hey, now let's address one of the big biggest misconceptions. A lot of people think gringo means white person. No. I can tell you that for sure. I've been called a gringo a couple of times and I ain't nowhere near white. See? So that's not what the word means. A black American can be a gringo. An Asian American can be a gringo. Even a Latino American who may have been born or grown up, or who may have grown up in the States, or from the States, can be considered a gringo. So a person's race really has nothing to do with it. It isn't what makes them a gringo. It's not what makes you a gringo. It's generally to perceive nationality or foreignness. Think about it this way. American doesn't mean white, although a lot of people, that's what they automatically think of, that image. And gringo doesn't mean white either. Now, you may have noticed that the stereotypical image of a gringo in Latin America is often a white American tourist. Blonde hair, blue eye, stereotypical. That's probably one reason people make this association. But that's a stereotype. That's not the definition of the word. So is gringo an insult? So here's where things get a little more complicated. Gringo is not inherently an insult. It can be. But it can be completely neutral. And usually that's what it is a lot of times. For example, mi amigo es gringo. My friend is American or North American from the US. There's nothing inherently offensive about that. You might have heard people from the US or UK or Canada, whatever, themselves jokingly using the word gringo. It just kind of catches on like that when you travel and you start sinking into different cultures, Spanish-speaking world. But let's not get it twisted now. The word can be used negatively too. And that's true of a lot of words. The tone, the context, the relationship between the people and the speaker's intentions all matter. If someone says gringo with hostility or uses it to express contempt toward North Americans, people from the US, whatever, or foreigners, then that's obviously different. So you got to have that third eye and that third ear. And regardless of how it's used, you got to stay cool. You can't fly off the handle. You know, you can't do it. You got to stay calm. Remember, you ain't on your own soil. And so things can get kind of muddy for you if you fly off the handle. Okay? Especially for something that was just meant to be innocent saying. Gringo, bienvenido. And you fly off the handle and they just saying, welcome. It's like that. But just stay cool. Stay cool. Understand how it's being used. So why does it sometimes have a negative connotation? Part of this comes down to history. The relationship between the U.S. and various Latin American countries, Spanish-speaking countries, has sometimes been, let's say, complicated. There have been political conflicts, military interventions, economic tensions, cultural differences, and there's plenty of stereotypes on both sides of the fence. So naturally, a word commonly associated with North Americans can sometimes pick up a negative undertone or overtone. Is it overtone or undertone? I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about. Regardless, that doesn't mean every use of the word is negative. It's perfectly possible for a Spanish speaker to say gringo without any hostility whatsoever. That's why translating gringo as simply an American, a North American slur or racial slur is just flat out misleading. Or translating it to mean just a white person, that's misleading too. But where did the word come from? Now we get to the most interesting part. And just like I said, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this. I've done some research. You probably heard the story about that gringo phrase, gringo. Now, according to the story, Mexican soldiers supposedly saw American soldiers wearing green uniforms and shouted, "Gringo! Gringo!" And somehow that supposedly became gringo. It's a great story. There's just one problem. There's no good historical evidence that this is where the word came from. If there is, hey, drop it in the comments, leave some proof, leave some receipts. It's considered to just be an explanation. It can be folklore. In other words, it's a story that sounds plausible, like a lot of things on the internet and off the internet, but especially on the internet. So many people repeat it like puppets. But the historical evidence doesn't really support it. So again, where does gringo actually come from? We're trying to get to the bottom of this. Well, the exact origin isn't completely settled. One widely discussed explanation connects it to the older Spanish word griego, meaning Greek. That may sound strange at first. Why would Greek turn into gringo? Well, historically, Spanish speakers could use expressions involving Greek to describe speech that was difficult or impossible to understand. It's basically the idea of, that sounds like Greek to me. Something I don't understand. And over time, words and expressions associated with foreigners, like a strange foreign speech, evolved. Something like that. It's like I said, help me out in the comments and let's air this out. I don't claim to be an expert on this subject, but I believe they need to be talked about. We need to discuss it. Now, there are other proposed explanations as well, and the precise historical development isn't completely certain. But the most important point is this. The gringo story is not established history. So if you hear someone confidently tell you that gringo came from American soldiers shouting gringo, take that explanation with a grain of salt. Now, one other thing to note is that it's not just about Americans, specifically North Americans everywhere. This is another reason the word can be very confusing. See, in everyday Latin American usage, gringo is very often associated with North Americans, but it doesn't universally mean a person from the US. In some places and contexts, it can be used more broadly for foreigners in general, especially if you don't speak Spanish. So if you're traveling through Latin America, pay attention to how the locals use the word. Don't assume that because you heard gringo used one way in Mexico, for example, that every Spanish speaker everywhere in the world uses it exactly the same way. So, should you be offended if somebody calls you a gringo? Personally, I wouldn't automatically take offense to it. Like I said, I was confused by the word when I first started traveling Latin America, but I just kind of took it all in, and the more I heard it in the context it was used, I realized, oh, this is just a word that really has become synonymous with foreigner. It don't mean nothing by it. So, it's like I said, don't automatically take offense to it or fly off the handle. More often than not, it's just an innocent word to mean foreigner. That's it, from my experience. If you've had different experience, hey, let me know in the comment. It's like I said, it's not always a good thing, but overall, it's just an innocent term. And I admit, sometimes when I hear the word, even though I understand the context of it, it still makes me cringe a little bit. I don't particularly like the word choice, but I understand that when a person don't really mean nothing by it. You see, so it's kind of like that with me. And I prefer something else like foreigner or whatever, but gringo, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit too, every now and then. But I've gotten used to it. And if a woman says, a female says it, I mean, that's just a complete turnoff to me. Like, I don't know, she can be fine as all get out. She called me a gringo. It's just something about it. It just turned me off every time. But, no offense. Just be real. Honestly, if you're going to spend any good amount of time in Spanish-speaking countries, you're going to encounter words and expressions that don't always perfectly map to English. And hey, that's part of the fun and the exploration and sometimes the frustration of learning another language and about a different culture. So what have we learned today? Gringo is a Spanish word. Yep. It's not simply an English slang term. And gringo does not automatically just exclusively mean a white person. It can be any color, like me. People of any race can be described as gringos depending on the context, and especially when you don't speak Spanish. And gringo is not automatically an insult. It can be neutral, casual, even humorous, or negative, depending on how it's used. Its meaning varies by country and context. It's just one of those things. And that's a perfect example of why learning about language and cultures isn't just about translations. Sometimes you have to understand the culture, the history, and the context behind a people and words and their expressions before you just jump to conclusions. So be easy. Be easy. Because Spanish isn't just a collection of English words with Spanish translations. It's a language all of its own, with its own history, its own regional differences, and its own way of seeing the world. And gringo is a pretty good example of that. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and reach out and smash that like button. And don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss a thing. And remember, make every experience, even being called a gringo, a rich experience. See you in the next one.